condolence. I know it's supposed to be a rough time for you.
Yes, it's
It's not easy in losing a loved one.
so true.
Yes, sir. But we are here for you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So without further ado, we're gonna ask Miss LaShawn Mills to lead us off in prayer. Miss Mills.
Thank you, Chairman. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together this evening in a sensitization forum. We ask for your presence as we learn how to better prepare ourselves, our families, and our communities. Bless our guest speaker, Mr. Brown, as he shares his knowledge and expertise with us this afternoon. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, LaShawn. Costas, any remarks from you, sir?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes. I'd just like to start by saying good evening to everyone, and special welcome to Mr. Marlon Brown, Regional Coordinator at ODPEM. I'd just like to say thank you. SSP would have mentioned the passing of my sister. I'd just like to thank everyone for the love and support I have been receiving over these last few weeks. I really thank you all. It means such a lot. But I'd also like to thank SSP and our chairman and president of the SAJPA and team for arranging this forum, which I think is very timely. We would have seen over the last few weeks, months, and I jog my memory, and I like to jog everyone's memory back to Hurricane Melissa, one of the strongest ever recorded, and the havoc it wreaked on our country. In recent weeks, you would have seen heat waves all across Europe. I think over 2,000 perished in France as a result. And of course, earthquake in Venezuela recently as well, where over, I think, 3,000 would have perished. Climate change, I firmly believe, has played a large or a huge role in all of these events. And I think it's real. It is real. And of course, as we move forward, we must find ways to mitigate. So I think it's very timely to have Mr. Brown here to share his knowledge, to help sensitize us as best as possible so we can mitigate, pardon me, the effects of some of these events. So again, I just like to say thank you all for being online, and I implore you, as I always do, to ensure we glean all the information we can get from Mr. Brown, and ask everyone to participate fully as we gather all the information we can to help our fellow citizens. So again, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Costas. As you both said earlier, this session is very important, enlightening. Persons might ask, we are in St. Andrew. Why should we worry about hurricane? Well, if we all know St. Andrew, and Costas can attest to it, we have some JPs that are living up in Mavis Bank, that is Upper St. Andrew, that they're always having landslide, and especially when it rains. Going up to Mavis Bank, Garden Town, Lawrence Tavern area.
Yes.
Yes, those are St. Andrew areas. I remember once I went and did a presentation to one of our JP that was celebrating her birthday, and we had to take a different route.
Yes.
Because the road was cut off.
Yes. Mount
So we
Over,
need to, yes.
Brandon Hill.
Yes, sir. So as I said, this session is timely. Even up on Jack's Hill, we are always having fires up by Jack's Hill.
Yes.
Yes, and those fires just call like that and spread. I was going to say spread like wildfire, but I don't think I can use that term. So, you know, so these things are timely. As Costas mentioned, our brothers and sisters down there in the north, south, in the west suffered tremendously after the passage of Hurricane Melissa, and even some persons in St. Andrew. So having Mr. Brown here doing the presentation, I think it's timely. We're having a lot of earthquakes, and I think we're having too many earthquakes. And with the heat that is on also, I gather that he will enlighten us what might happen after this. So without further, I'm gonna ask Miss Rosemary to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. Costas Forbes, Chairman Rooms, sorry. Our guest speaker, Mr. Brown, fellow justices, good evening.
Evening.
It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mr. Marlon A.S. Brown. Mr. Brown is a highly accomplished disaster risk management professional and educator with over 15 years of experience leading national resilience initiative and academic excellence. He currently serves as a regional coordinator for the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, in Jamaica. Mr. Brown is dedicated to mainstreaming climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies to build a more resilient nation. He oversees relief and logistic operation for the parishes of St. Anne, St. Mary, and Portland, which expanded recently after Hurricane Melissa to the western parishes of Jamaica. His technical expertise spanned the full spectrum of disaster operation. He currently holds a BEd in English Language and Literacy, which he obtained at the Jamaica University College, and he's currently pursuing an MS in Natural Resource Management, Disaster Risk Management at the University of the West Indies. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brown to speak with us. Thank you. Mr. Brown, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Mr. Brown, over to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Ms. Henry. Thank you, Chairman Rooms. Costas, again, I extend my condolences to you, and thank you all, Justice of the Peace from St. Andrew. My apologies, I couldn't find where this button had moved to unmute me. But I trust you can see my screen.
Yes,
we're seeing.
But you're not in presentation mode.
Right.
Not in presentation mode.
No.
No, this is just a quick one. I'm gonna change it to the slide.
All right.
I will also put on my, yes, I like the background where the waves are crashing in. You notice that one? So, Justice of the Peace, thank you again. I have on the screen just a quick snapshot of what was or has been predicted for our hurricane season. And after this, I go right into what we look at: basic disaster management and some earthquake stuff. And I deliberately start with this one because we all know we're in the hurricane season. And I know the presentations and all the information coming out would have said that we are looking at a below normal season. And as such, some persons begin to drop their guard. And I'm very keen to remind persons that 55% chance of a below normal season is one part of it. The other part of the coin says there's a 45% chance of a normal season or above normal season, right? And so it simply means that we're expecting less hurricanes to form, but it doesn't mean that we're not expecting strong hurricanes to come about. And so I am on the other side of the coin to say let's be prepared, because preparation is the key, and ODPEM is in the business of preparing the nation. And so I want us to remind ourselves that we're in the hurricane season. We are still very much there in terms of the number of named storms to expect, a maximum of 14, a minimum of 8, with at least 3 to 6 becoming hurricanes, and 1 to 3 becoming a major hurricane. And we know it only takes one. And Hurricane Melissa would have been our stark reminder that it only takes one to become for a major hurricane to strike us and for us to be plunged into the situation that we are now in. And when we look at the effects of Hurricane Melissa, and Melissa only impacted half the country, essentially, in terms of a direct hit, it took out 53% of our GDP. And so I like to talk numbers when I'm looking at these things. And I tell people, if you're earning $1 million and 53% of that is gone, what are you left with? And not just what are you left with, but how do you now manage with what you're left with to be able to recover and respond appropriately? And as such, we need to be prepared. Further down on my just one pager is the whole idea of the named storms. And we're looking at, as I say, a maximum of 14 this year, but they have given us all the way down to Wilfred. And would have known that at least Arthur would have passed already in terms of a system that would have been formed and out there while everybody was still quiet, wondering if we're going to be having any hurricanes. The flip side to this challenge that we're having is that there's a phenomenon which is called El Nino. You have El Nino and you have La Nina, and they perform differently across different spheres of the earth, whether it's in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. This year we're experiencing what is called an El Nino, which is mainly dry weather, hot, dry air coming across the northern section of the region. And what this does, it suppresses the ideal conditions for hurricanes to form. But it's not a continuous belt of flowing hot air. There are pockets and gaps in between all of that, which mean that if the window is left long enough open, hurricanes can form, and deadly ones at that. And so we have to always be prepared that something will come up. Now, with this El Nino comes hot, dry conditions, which means drought. It means drought for our people in general, drought for our farmers, which exacerbate things, which means low production in crop loss. And once you start to lose production, increasing costs, and everything just multiplies. And so this system is more concerning to us at national here because it means that we must have a drought mitigation plan in place. It means that if we didn't have water harvesting and storage mechanism in place personally, and as businesses and as government, we are going to have problems. Now, we've seen water lockoffs start already, and NWC advising us, especially in those served by the Hermitage Dam in the corporate area and so forth, where we have started water rationing because we're not getting the rainfalls that we would normally get, and the flows into the reservoirs, both the Hermitage and Mona, is not significant. And so we now have to start rationing water, which means that we at home, we're going to have less water in our pipes on a consistent basis. And for those of us who still have it, I encourage you and I implore you all to start storing water. Store water in your 50-gallon drums or 55-gallon drums. Those regular blue barrels that we have, it goes a far way. If you don't have the big black rhino tanks or so forth to store 400-gallon or more. And this is going to be very significant as the season goes on because it's getting hotter, it's getting drier, and it means that less water is going to be available. It also means that the fire brigade will be more busy as they are going to be called upon to be out in a lot more wildfires and so forth, which has started already. And so we can't get comfortable saying, oh yes, you have a below normal hurricane season. And so, not much to prepare for. There's a lot more to prepare for, in my estimation, as drought takes a lot more out of us than hurricanes do. And droughts are prolonged over a longer period than the impact of an hurricane, which is the winds blowing, rains, and it passes within a day or less. And you're there now to pick up pieces. With the drought, it means that you're going to have to sustain yourselves throughout that period until the rains come back. And as rightly pointed out by Custis Forbes, is that climate change is real and we are living the effects of climate change on us. Or farmers will tell you the struggles they have to go through in terms of water storage, harvesting, and getting these things up so they can continue to produce crops right throughout the season and seasons, which goes back into our tourism sector where we're not producing enough. And so there's issue for them there again, not having enough water. Businesses can't go on, restaurants have issues, they can't open up. And so you can see the multiplicity of what is happening as a result of the El Nino and the suppression of hurricane within the season. So I'm starting there because this is something that I believe a lot of us are missing. We're missing the point that if you haven't already started to store and harvest water for your own domestic use and purposes, you're going to be found wanting. And then you're going to be found having to be paying trucks to carry water to you. And one, you're not sure the source of the water. You're not sure of how long they have had it and the whole treatment of the water. And so you're now left exposed to waterborne diseases in a time where things are limited. And so this is how I start off looking at the hurricane season, saying to us that we need to be prepared for the hurricane, but even more so for the drier part of the season, the drought that is coming, the rationing of our water, and what that means for us. And indeed, NWC's slogan is real, and it's even more real now than before, that water is life. Without water, we literally can't do anything, and life will not continue. And so that's the first part of what I'm sharing with us today. As I move into the presentation, I was asked of me by Chairman Rooms. Before I change over, any questions, any concerns, any queries so far?
Someone is
Okay.
asking in the chat, how many is normal?
We usually get up to 18 name storms that we're looking at in a given year. And with a max with where we have major hurricanes looking at 6 or more. And so this scale down is a conservative scale down because again we're looking at major storms being 1 to 3 rather than 3 to 6 or 4 to 8 thereabout. But as I said before, it only needs one. And then that's it. And for those of us who remember Hurricane Sandy, which was a Category 2 hurricane which formed in the Caribbean basin and made a straight beeline through eastern Jamaica, we would understand that it doesn't have to be a major hurricane to do significant damage. And if we have a system that carries a lot of rainfall, that doesn't have to be a hurricane, right? Like when we had Tropical Depression 16, which became Hurricane Nicole afterwards, it dumped a whole heap of water on us. And from there, we had issues trying to recover because we were inundated and overrun by the system. And so once we have hurricanes to think about, then we know that the typical thing is the wind that it comes with, which is devastating, but equally devastating is the water. And if we're coastal, we know we have issues with coastal flooding and storm surge. And if you look back to Hurricane Ivan in 2004, where the storm surge, which had wave heights over 18 meters, taking away sections of Caribbean estate, then we understand the significance of these things as they happen. All right, so I'm going to be looking at what we call basic disaster management, understanding some terminologies as we go along and build out the whole platform of how we help to prepare ourselves better for impending emergencies and the different natures that they will come with. So of course you'd hear we talk about hazards and disaster and what it means. For us in the field of disaster risk management, a hazard is anything or situation that could potentially cause harm. And any harm to whether it's your life, your health, your property, or the environment. That's a hazard, anything with the potential. And so fire would be with a hazard that we have to contend with. Also, we have the shaking of the ground and so forth. And so these possibilities, hurricanes are hazards and so forth. When they become a reality and they impact us, that's when it becomes a disaster, when it's impact on us. So a disaster is natural or man-made hazard that has occurred, causing drastic change to the environment and exceeds the community capacity to cope. Now, this part is important to us, where it says exceeds the capacity of the community to cope. So for us in Jamaica, being a small island state, our trigger for the National Emergency Operations Center to be activated, it has to affect, this hazard or impact has to affect a minimum of 3 parishes to trigger the national mechanism. However, if the impact is on, let's say, Kingston City, it is so significant that that itself would trigger a National Emergency Operations Center to be enacted, because in Kingston, on any given day, a third of the population is here in one place. And so you can understand how this will affect us as a people. And so that will trigger some things. If 1/3 of the population being impacted, we have stuff happening. As we continue to look at vulnerability, and this has to do with how exposed we are, our susceptibility to the different things that may affect us, whether it be economical, social, environmental, or physical. So economics plays a very important role in how vulnerable a lot of us are. And knowing the population of our people and the demographic and how many of us are impoverished or living below a certain standard of living, where if you check like the inner city communities or some rural communities where they live hand to mouth. And so they don't know where the next meal is coming from until it comes, but there's nothing put down for them. So it becomes an issue where they're very susceptible to any sort of hazard becoming a disaster upon them. And then, of course, your social or your socio-economic state and the environmental capacity for you where you live, the housing stock that you live in, the conditions that is in. So if you look at those who lost their homes in Westmoreland, per se, they would have been very vulnerable because their housing was already at risk, very susceptible to wind and water. And that most of these homes were temporary homes, right? Because these are houses, for us who don't know, the people would be able to lift them up and transport them from one place to another. So, they weren't grounded on anything. And so their vulnerability would have been very high. And of course, as we look at risk, and this is a possibility of being affected by any of these systems that are out there, whether it's social, environmental, economic, and so forth. So your risk and your vulnerability together will determine the level of impact any disaster will have on you and your ability to recover coming forward from that. So when we look at the whole idea in the disaster risk management sphere, we need to ensure that effective and efficient planning, organization, and of course, direction and control processes are optimum. And so we have to be on a continuous preparation campaign and be able to inform and impact persons as how they think about the environment and how they go about their daily lives. So when we're looking at risk management in the DRM field, we're talking about risk analysis. And that entails looking at the hazards and vulnerability studies that are out there and what it means for us. And then from that, we look at risk reduction. How can we reduce this? Is it preventable or do we have to mitigate against it? So one of the risk reduction factors would have been the drain cleaning, so to speak, or using hurricane straps for those who don't have slab roofs, And so this is how you reduce the risk or try to prevent that risk from becoming that reality upon you. And of course, preparing for an adverse event, preparing for something negative to happen, because if you don't prepare, it means that you're further behind in trying to recover. But if you were prepared, then you'd have at least some steps in place to be able to help you to recover and manage and begin to put things back together in to get back to a sense of normalcy. And of course, having been at this stage with preparing and alerting and responding to these issues, how do we now look at recovery? And recovery takes on your immediate response, your short term, and your long term. So I like to say that we have 3 R's in recovery, and it's rehabilitation, it's reconstruction, and it also has the relocation component. Because it may very well be that wherever you are not able to return there to put back your life together. And such relocation becomes a major discussion point, as now we are facing from the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa, where a lot of persons who have been displaced for one reason or another, whether it is that they were on a lease or they were maybe squatting or they were on lands that they're allowed to use for a time being, and now the owners are saying, we do not want you back there. We have plans for development, and so relocation has to be a part of it. And that poses further issues for us who are trying to manage in the field, and then for government furthermore, in terms of where do we find suitable lands, and for those who are unwilling to relocate, how do we now begin that conversation for them to understand the situation they're in really, and that it is best for them to relocate to other areas. So the whole cycle in a nutshell is in front of us, where we have the pre-impact phase, and then we have after the impact. And in the pre-impact phase, we look at capacity building, mitigation and preparation. And we're always in this mode of capacity building, mitigation and preparation until something happens. Once we have an event, that's when we go into our response mode. And in our response mode, looking at responding to the immediacy of the emergency, how we go into restoration and reconstruction. And I like to ask the question when I do this presentation, having just come out of Hurricane Melissa, if we are out of Hurricane Melissa, at what stage of the disaster management cycle are we? And I'll pause here for anybody to hazard a guess. Where are we? Looking at where are we after Hurricane Melissa has impacted us. And with that said, we also look at, we are right back in a hurricane season. And if we haven't come out of Hurricane Melissa yet, but we're back into another season, preparing for hurricane and the effects of that, and it simply means that we are in this continuous cycle where we're now preparing and still responding or in our recovery mode from Hurricane Melissa. Was there another question in the chat, Chairman?
I see something about recovery and still response for some areas. I'm not sure.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
Recovery and still response for some areas.
Of course. And of course, we're back into preparation and mitigation. So effectively at this point in time, we're in all phases because we're still having to deal with the fallout from Hurricane Melissa. And so we have to make sure that we are managing what we're dealing with, and also getting the word out to more and more people, because I find that no matter how much of these presentations and sensitizations we do, we still have people who have never been exposed, or we were exposed to something many years ago and never heard it back after that. And so we want to make sure that we continue these things. And I believe the justices of the peace are in a very strategic position to help to share this and have the word spread more in terms of preparation within the communities that they effectively are located. Now, as we continue, we're looking at the before phase of things happening, or prevention methods, what we can do. And this comes from knowing your place, knowing your home, knowing your environment, knowing your workplace. What are some things that we can do to help make things less, prevent things from happening? And so this is when you do your hazard hunt, going around, checking, making sure things are in place. And if you notice that your building had started having, let's say, a simple issue of when your plugs are not working well, and you plug it in one section, it don't work, but you plug it in the other section, it's working. This should trigger something in your mind that this is faulty and it needs to change. Because the next thing that comes from that is a short circuit and a fire. And something that you could change for $100, now it's gonna cost you $100,000 or more. All right, so those are the things that you can put in place before. For your mitigation measures, these are things that could be structural or non-structural, things that you can do to mitigate against, to lessen the impact, because you cannot prevent it. And so one of the mitigation structures that is non-structural is sensitization sessions, awareness sessions, going around providing knowledge-based education, practical tips and tools, how to go about making yourself safer. And of course, structural would mean if you have to go and reinforce a part of your building, you go have to replace zinc or so forth, then you go into those structural elements. Now, again, part of your preparedness to reduce loss of life and damage to property is to make sure that you follow instructions, you follow the guidelines, you follow, like for some person who are building and we're not following the building code properly, then you put yourself and your families at risk, and your business if that's one of the cases. And so we have to make sure that in doing the things, we do it properly so that we can prepare ourselves on things to come. And part of our preparedness method is planning. Planning for something to happen and working and hoping for the best that it doesn't. Right? But you have to plan. And part of your plan is to make sure that you actually have an emergency plan. Actually develop a plan for your home, for your families, for your business. And make sure that those who would be affected or impacted knows about the plan. Because sometimes, a part of the plan may be to go to a neighbor's house or a family member's house, should you have to relocate. But the family member that you plan to go to don't know that they're a part of your plan. And that becomes an issue. So you have to make sure that you have the plan and everybody that will be impacted knows about the plan. So you develop your plans, your SOPs. You make sure people know that those are your sensitization sessions. You do drills, you do practices to make sure that people are aware what to do, right, in the event that something happens. And of course, you make arrangements for vulnerable people in your home, in your business, in the community. And of course, we make sure that some things that we can do to help us is to not clutter our environment. Stop hoard and accumulate too many things and just fill up under your tables and those places. And then when time comes for you to seek refuge, you have nowhere to turn. And so we have to do that. And of course, if there are repairs that are to be made to your buildings, to your establishments, you do those in a timely manner, because you do not know when the next event will strike, and especially in the case of earthquakes. And so preparedness have to be the key in that part, and what we call alacrity, moving with purpose to get things done beforehand, so that when there's an impact, you're in a better position to begin your recovery. Of course, make sure you have your emergency kit. And we always tell you that, for me, most important thing to have in your emergency kit is not your flashlight and your radio and your canned food. It is actually second to last thing on the list. It is having clean, potable water. Most important. Because potable water can be used to sanitize and do a lot of stuff. but most importantly, to keep you hydrated so that you do not die from dehydration. And we know that the body cannot last more than how many days it is? 2, 3 days without having any water. And so for me, I'm telling everybody, most important thing when you're packing your emergency kit is water. And I will remind people that water do expire. So you have to be in the mode of checking and replacing, but make sure you have water. And coming back to the whole El Nino effect and the drought that will be on us, it is even more important to have water stored for domestic purpose. The signs I'll not go into, as we know, well, some we have to know evacuation and so forth. But when you see the red signs, it's all related to fire and how we should be able to operate. And one of a very important part is that wherever you are, even your homes, we need to have fire extinguishers because it's one of those things that will save you from further effects and fallout from fires becoming a secondary effect of earthquakes. And so having it and knowing how to use it is most important. A lot of us would not have seen or have access to fire blankets. They're around. There are things that you can have in the home to help you suppress fire should they happen and so forth. Safety signs and gears and equipment that we need to make sure we have or we know of and know where to get them because in times of emergency can help you. We're not saying that you need this as your part of your kit. We're saying that these are some of the things that will help you depending on how you function in your home, in your jobs, and within the community. To have these things on hand, it will help not just you, but those around you. Coming out of an impact, you go into what we call your response, your immediate response phase. And usually the immediate response phase has to do with evacuation and rendering emergency assistance. Food supplies become very critical, water supply become very critical, and of course, shelter. So temporary shelter is one of those things. And to make sure that you're safe, your emergency medical care, should persons become injured and so forth, are some of the immediate things that happen after a disaster strikes. And so we have to be prepared for those to respond with it. And of course, to be prepared for people who are less fortunate, who become desperate, I should say, would begin to loot and cause all sort of issues within the community. And these are things we have to prepare for and not be caught and become victims of these situations. As we go further into our response after an event, then of course rehabilitation becomes a critical step. The homes that have been impacted, can they be rehabilitated? Does it just need some sheets of zinc to go back on and you can go back inside and continue living? Or does it need a few posts to make back your corner posts and some plyboard to put back up things? The roof soaked a lot because it was slab and it wasn't made properly, and so now you need to go back up and put on a sealant and so whatever it is that is short term for you to put back together quickly, that's rehabilitation. And then as you go further now, it goes into what we call the long-term recovery of stuff that will require rebuilding, relocating, reconstructing of things, bridges, roads, retaining walls, and so forth. And of course, this one, no, we can speak a lot about, especially in St. Andrew. The upper section of St. Andrew, where we had a lot of landslides, and it don't take much for landslide to happen. And for those of us who have to travel Irish Town side, going up to Newcastle and so forth, where a major section of the road disappeared, and we saw where the community members came into action because they knew they couldn't remain cut off. And so we move into the rehabilitation, into medium, short term, long term, how we can get things going again to help us function. And this becomes a major part of our planning when we're doing our stuff. And as I mentioned before, your reconstruction is medium to long term, and we're talking about major damages to infrastructure and how we get those back on stream and how long. And all of this is dependent on how robust our economy would have been, how much funds we would have had in storage, safekeeping, so to speak. If we had insurance like we had with CRIF, to help us get back to some sense of normalcy in a shorter space of time. And the less you have in reserve is the less you're able to recover quickly. So we're saying that our planning is so important for everyone, and it highlights these 4 points. That one, when you plan and you plan effectively, it minimizes risks. It saves time, it reduces panic, and most importantly, it helps us to prioritize the resources, where it should go, where needs it most, and how that will be used to get us back on the road to normalcy, recovery as quickly as possible. So I'll pause here if there are any questions for anything as we looked at the basic disaster management framework or structure as I see Ms. Phillips. A. Phillips has a hand raised.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All protocols observed. I listened to the presentation. It's a very good presentation. I lived in Portmore for 17 years before I moved to where I'm at now. And one of the things that was, because I was very active with the municipality and citizens association, everything. There was constant training through Miss Philippa Ricketts from the municipality on disaster preparedness and emergency management. Now, one of the things is that in Portmore, you'd have persons who would move, because I'm one of them after how many years, but I still would have had that training and not being there to use it, but I know the training continues. So my question is, while the information is good, as JP is here, is there any consideration for the training of JPs in shelter management, disaster risk management, and I would hasten to say hurricane, because it's one of the questions I used to ask up to 17 years ago. What if there's a major earthquake in Portmore? What would we do? And we still haven't gotten that training yet. So how many years later, what does that look like? And as for us as JPs, will there be training in those areas?
All right, so a very good point, and I thank you for the service that you would have given earlier in Portmore and continued service now in your new location. So the local authorities do have the mandate for disaster preparedness and response within each parish or municipality. And so training would have been organized from that end on a community basis or maybe on a sector basis, depending on what is happening. And where necessary, from us here at National, we support or we would organize trainings for various groups where it would be prudent. And I believe bringing the justices of the peace together within each parish would be a very big step in doing some of these trainings. And so that is something that I would advocate for in going forward. So as a group and a specialized group that has a far reach on the community, this would be a good one to do, personally speaking. So that would be something that we have to push, maybe coming through our training, information and training department, to see how we can do a series of that going across the all the parishes in the country. At this very moment, I can't tell you that something. Yes, I saw Robert hand is up. That you have a specific training, but I know through the various community groups, those trainings are continuous with the local authorities.
And I would second that, Sir Brown, it is very important. So what we could do as an organization, I'll speak to the custos and maybe we can write ODPEM to have some sort of training like that where persons can be trained and certified, just like how Philippa was certified over there in Portmore. Because we
Right.
do have the places as you speak about, as you talk about earlier, Brandon Hill, Custos mentioned Brandon Hill, Mavis Bank, Garden Town Road and all of that. And we'd want to know how to assist persons that are out there. Because most times when we have a hurricane or an earthquake, it's volunteers, you know. And as justices
It's
of the
always.
peace, I would know that the
Yes.
justice of the peace would be the one that would take up the mantle and come and assist. So it is
And
something
you're
that
very
we will look at.
strategically positioned, you know, so definitely that's one of the things we have to look at.
Yes,
And it will help to build the capacity further. So
yes.
definitely. Robert?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I do endorse the need for training. Just to say that, you know, I was commissioned just this year in February, and already, you know, in action with persons from with all kind of issues just coming to, you know, get answers. And I think that this will be very useful because I'm from the Salisbury Heights area of in St. Andrew.
Okay.
And
Yes.
I see whereby such training, you know, would be useful because even speaking from the last experience of Melissa, you know, it was quite a bit. And you know, just to be able to organize it oneself and to even to be able to give directions immediately, you
Yes.
know, that would make a lot of sense to me. But also this platform here, it just by chance I happened to see this coming in our group about this training. So I wasn't made aware prior to, and my timing may not necessarily be to complete this training with you. But I want to also know if this presentation can be made available. I could put my email into the chat. I'm not certain, but I think the information that I'm seeing so far is good and would be of help.
Sure. I'll share it with chairman and that can be circulated.
Yeah, and we will
I thank you
circulate
for
it.
that. I do know your Salisbury area. I've been working with the farmers there, and I'm trying to do a lot more work with the farmers in rural St. Andrew through the Agricultural Society, and rather to help to shore up the whole issue of how we deal with climate change and the fallout and effects on the various hazards. So it is needed, and as I said before, the justices of the peace are strategically positioned within the communities, and you do have a far reach, and it will be very good for us to tap into that part as part of the management of the various community groups that we have, you know, because when you're involved like that, it makes more meaning for the other persons within the community.
Sir Marlon, I see in the chat, I'm not sure if you can answer this one. They say, bottled water has expiry date. How long to store tap water? And did you say the water expired? If so, how long is water to be stored?
All right. So if you notice when you store water, let's start there. In a drum or a container, after a while, it changes color. Or you start to see some things in the bottom or on the sides of the container. Because we still have living organisms in it, you know. Not harmful at that time to us, so we can always use it, and it's treated with chlorine and so forth. As long as the water is moving, then you have less of an issue of expiration. For those of us who use the drums, and so you fill up and then you use from that in your homes, then you're less likely to have a buildup in your system that causes the water to expire. So usually if you have it in large containers that is stored in cool, dry places, it can last you quite a while. I've been working with NWC and the Ministry of Health for us to come up with some proper guidelines as to how long to store water. I normally tell people start to recycle, change over your water after 3 months. So if you had water stored in, let's say, a 5-gallon bottle container, upon the 3rd month of having it there, use it, fill it back, and so it gives you time. So it's there's a continuous change. That's the advice we have right now until they give me an actual guideline where we're gonna be publishing to the public to say when you store the water, this is how long you should have it sitting before using, because it does break down, it expire, and it can be cleaned again. You don't know if you boil it, if you add chlorine to it and so forth, can become potable once again. But personally, after 3 months, you change over, and so you keep your container and the water viable. Any further questions?
That was it. Bottle the expiry. You mentioned drain cleaning.
Right, as a
As a method of
mitigation measure.
prevention, but every year it does
Yes.
that or start 2 days before the impact.
The issue with that, is we are not very good stewards of the environment when it comes to solid waste disposal and management, us as a people. And we may start drain cleaning early, but by the time the season goes along, you wonder if it was cleaned in the first place. And so that's one of the reasons you find that the political representatives tend to want to clean as it comes towards a particular part of the season, because that's when we usually get heightened activities. But the major problem is us as a people not being good stewards of the environment in treating with our solid waste. I can point specifically, like if you go to the McGregor Gully area, and it's not what is dumped at the lower end, it's what is coming from further up the stream. And we see the gully being eroded and impacted by furniture. You find couch, bed, mattress, fridge, stove coming down into the gully, and the areas that have breached, these things, when they hit on it and impact it, it break it up further and cause collapse. So we're having a problem along the entire stretch in terms of people disposing things, solid waste, furniture and other items into the gullies. And then we have the evidence of this now. For those things that are carried straight through the gullies, it comes out in the harbor and it collects across Refuge Key and other areas of the Palisades. And every year we go out there for World Cleanup Day, with the World Environmental stuff happening, and the amount of debris that is collected. And these are things that are washed down in the gullies. So until we become better citizens in disposing of our solid waste better, in a more responsible way, we're going to have this drain cleaning problem continuously. So the source is what we need to fix. Then we'll have less reason to be spending so much money in drain cleaning, because the entities responsible for that could do the maintenance over a period of time. So that is a compounding situation.
And I agree with you.
Anything?
And I think the National Solid Waste they are coming up with the government to have a ticketing system that if persons are found in breach, just like how you have the traffic ticket, you're gonna have
Yes.
some ticket for when you do these sort of things. Because as you said, it is us. We that are
It
putting
is
the
us.
debris. Guys, if you pass Constant Spring Road there, a lot
Mhm.
of debris is right there in the gully and is garbage. And
Yes,
then when you look at the garbage you can walk from from the road into the gully using the garbage that is there.
exactly. And so remember, the gullies are there drains. So if you see natural things coming down like wood and dirt and sand and stuff, you'd understand that. But when you see garbage, then you know we are the problem, and that's one of the biggest challenge we have in the disaster management field, and NSWME struggles with that. Because remember, the gullies are not designed for the trucks to drive, go down there, go clean up anything in the first place. And the whole operation that you have to put in place just to try and clear the gullies from that, getting backhoe and those things down there is a huge undertaking, a waste of resources and monies. And so we have to get back. I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping a ticketing system will work. We have to try something. And so it bemoans me every time when we talk about this part, because it's us, we the people, who are the problem, because we're not being responsible. All right. So thank you for that part, everyone, for participating. We will go into the earthquake section, and I know this is very heavy on a lot of people. We've been having recent earthquakes. We've seen devastation in our own region and across the other side of the world, and we have been having our own shakes. And again, we have to be reminded that this is real. It is with us. There's no season for earthquake. It happens right throughout the year at any time. Jamaica experiences over 300 earthquakes a year. Most are minor tremors. But if you know anything about shaking something continuously, after a while, things start to break. And so we have to be mindful of that. And knowing that we sit on the northern edge of a microplate, where we have a split between the Caribbean plate and the North American plate, Jamaica is very much in that point where earthquakes will happen continuously, and having that major fault line which runs through Haiti into Jamaica, Plantain Garden River being one of the prime example of the only river in Jamaica to flow east to west, because it follows that fault line, and then that fault line comes down into the Kingston Harbor. So we effectively are in a very active zone. We thank God that we've not been so active like before, but it's something that's very real for us. And we've just marked, what, it was a 300th anniversary or somewhere near there for the 1692 earthquake. The anniversary of that was in June. June 7 was the day that occurred with the Port Royal earthquake, which took 2/3 of the city of Port Royal and also caused a localized tsunami. And so we have a slip off from the earthquakes leading to that. So you have the secondary effect being also real for us, because our tsunamis are going to come from we losing land to the sea in a rapid way. And Port Royal is a reminder of that, and others that have come subsequent to that. So we know earthquake is the shaking of the ground. And it is what we call a sudden onset emergency or disaster. So hurricanes are slow onset. It takes some time to come with seed forming. We know it's coming. Earthquakes are sudden onset. Also are tsunamis. And tsunamis, as we know, are triggered by earthquakes, major land slippages as a result of major earth movement, whether it's from an explosion, maybe mining caused some of these things, testing of weapons caused some of these things. And so we have to be mindful of the sudden onset events such as earthquakes. Now, this map in front of you is not to alarm us, but it's to give us an idea of what we talk about when we call fault lines, cracks and faults, breaks, fissures in the land. So those yellow lines you see there show you all the cracks and the breaks that is in Jamaica, the major ones. And then you have a large concentration in the Kingston, St. Andrew, Portland, St. Thomas area. And if you know what is in that area, then you understand why it is that way. That's where we have our Blue and Jonker Mountains. And these are what we call fold mountains. They're formed from folding and faulting, and the land rising up from beneath the sea. And that's where we have, coincidentally, most of our earthquakes occurring in this area. And of course, the major fault line which leaves Jamaica goes back to was Haiti. which is the Henry Keel or Planting Garden River fault line in that area as well. But as you look at the map, the entire Jamaica has these fault lines. And save and except for the plains in St. Catherine, plains in Clarendon, and sections of St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland, where you have those flatlands, your George's Plain, and so forth. And of course, sections of St. Andrew, where the Ligani Plain is, you realize that the fault lines are literally everywhere. And then now, if you look around the coastal area, you see a light blue line, and that speaks of what we call our tsunami inundation zone or coastal flooding zone. And these zones extend from the coast up to, in some places, over 200 meters inland or more. But our south coast is more vulnerable, especially Clarendon section, where you have Portland, Cottage and those places, which is very, very flat, always underwater. And of course, sections of St. Catherine, the lower sections of Portmore and so forth, you'll get those issues happening. So you can see where water will come on land should we have a tsunami type event happening, and the entire Jamaica would be impacted from those. Now, this is a visual of the seismicity over a 10-year period. I need to update this one for us all. See what earthquake unit has since 2018 until now. Or we normally do it in 10-year periods. But this is the trend which occurs right across year to year. The big red ones, and I'll show you some like this big red one off the coast of Westmoreland. Then this one right between the border of Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth, another one here. Those would have been earthquakes 4.0 or more. The ones that are major that you feel. You have one here in Portland, another one here in St. Andrew. And there's a cluster, as you see, around the Blue Jonquil Mountain area between Portland, St. Mary, St. Andrew, St. Thomas. And this cluster is where you get most of the movements, because that's where we have the cluster of fault lines within the country that would have been impacted by any moving of the land, whether north or south of us. And equally of note, we have quite a bit of earthquakes on the south coast, which is what we call our marine earthquakes. So they happen out in the ocean. And these are some of the earthquakes that will give you tsunamis because it happens off course. Of course, the further out, deeper waters at a greater depth give you a more likelihood of tsunamis happening. And so we always keep a watch. There's a 24-hour watch. We are plugged into the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center that gives off every reading right across the world. We know what's happening. And then here in Jamaica at ODPEM and Met Office, we get the warnings for our region coming directly to us, where it comes as an alert in the form of an email that comes on all the devices that we have, so we know that this is happening and so forth. Our own earthquake unit is building out what we call our own monitor station. So we have what we call raspberry shakers that are placed right across all the parishes of Jamaica now, both coastal and interior. So we're able to map our own activities on a local level to give us a more accurate reading of the depth of these earthquakes and how significant in terms of how great the shake is and so forth. So there's a lot of work going on where that is concerned, you know. So this gives you a visual of what we look like when we do get our earthquakes. And as I tell you, we get over 300 earthquakes per year. Most are in the yellow zone, the yellow and the little black dots. But when it begins to get orange and red, you know, it's beginning to get more serious, where we feel those earthquakes. This is a pull-out map of Kingston and St. Andrew. And as we look at this map, specifically, we look at to see where the major fault that we have within KSA and where those lie and what does that mean for us. So looking at this image on the screen, there's one major fault line or a series that comes together, which runs from the northwest down to the southeastern section. So we're talking about from up by Florence Hill area, coming all the way down through Hermitage, Stony Hill Hermitage. If you follow that line, coming through Papine, and then eventually going to Copacabana out by Bull Bay area. That's Kingston and St. John's major fault line that runs almost a continuous straight line down that section. And of course, branching off to the west of that in the areas of Manning's Hill and that side, you see some other fault there. And then if you look over to the eastern side, Strawberry Hill and so forth, you see a series of other smaller fault lines on that section. So this is a zoom in. So the picture I showed you before, you see a lot of fault lines. You thought it was everywhere was full. But when you zoom in, you realize that it's not everywhere, but for us to be able to see it on the map, it had to be that bright and maybe that big. And so this is what we look like as a parish, right? As a city parish, where what we have to do in terms of major faulting and what impact that will have on us when we talk about shake. Now, point to note for St. Andrew, especially, and if you're in the Ligani Plains area, you know about Ligani, Mona, and all those surrounding areas, the flatland. It is what we call an alluvial plain. So it has sandy soil and a lot of water beneath it. And that's why NWC is able to drill for wells within this area and are successful at tapping into water underground. So when we would have had an earthquake, your buildings won't get a rigid shake, but you will get a more wavy shake because the soil is going to move like water. And evidence of that would have been, again, out by Port Royal, where you have the Giddy House and how it leaned in and so forth because of the water beneath it and the sandy soil. So it is similar in nature to what we have in the Ligani Plains area of KSA. St. Catherine, we did a hazard mapping of St. Catherine, where we look at some areas, and if you look at the key quickly, flooding would have been highlighted in the Lowidersville, Old Harbor Road area, but then if you look in the Glengulf Bogwalk area, it's a landslide flooding situation. And so as we go about mapping every parish and every community within each parish, realize that there are some things that are going to be specific to some areas that other areas will not have as a challenge to deal with, as a hazard. And so we would have done the same thing for KSA, and you'd have seen the upper parts of St. Andrew having a lot of landslide issues as we know of, and as you come further down, you're looking at the flooding issues. So what do we do when the earthquake strikes? And I want to tell everybody, do not panic. But that's easier said than done. But how we remain calm and not panic is by knowing what to do and practicing what to do. And as such, we need to have an alarm system in place that helps us to alert us about the shake that is happening. Most places do not have an alarm for earthquake. There's one for fire, there's one for something else, but we do not have one for earthquakes. And that's something that we need to insist happens because and people sensitize about it so that we know what to do. A lot of times most people would ask, did you feel it? And that's how somebody know that there was some shaking or something comes up on social media. But within your own building and place itself, there's no response mechanism. There's nothing to detect and to say, oh, that's an earthquake, to trigger something and so forth. Of course, after you're aware that there's a shake happening, what do we do? And we have to teach about the DCH, that's the duck cover hold position, and make sure that we remain safe and secure first before trying to run out anywhere. When it is shaking, we advise you not to run. Do not try to get the door and run outside. A lot of evidence across the world have shown that a lot of persons that they find dead, they usually find them trying to escape from a building rather than shelter in place under a table, in a sturdy corner, crouching or so forth. Evacuation, knowing evacuation routes, know where to take. You have pre-planned routes. And of course, in an earthquake, you don't know where it's going to be blocked off from not. So if your planned route is impacted, then you have to find alternate routes. These are things we need to have in place. And when you get outside, we're together. Whether it is you get outside of your house and you have 10 members in the family or 4, everybody needs to know where to go. Similarly, for your businesses and places of work and these things. And of course, we practice. What's the point of assembling? So that we can do a roll call, a head count, to know if everybody is safe, who is missing, and if somebody is missing, how do we account for them and then inform the emergency responders where we last saw them, what was happening. Remember, a lot of time people go to bathroom and things happen. And somebody get trapped in the bathroom because they were in the bathroom when things happen and they couldn't get out. And so you have to be aware of these things that happen. And of course, after every event, we need to do an evaluation. We need to go back to see, did what we planned, did what we say we're going to do, did it work? Yes, it worked. How well did it work? If it didn't work, what else can we do? So we always have to do that evaluation and assessment. So of course, I spoke about preparing your home before earthquake. Make sure that you do not block your hallways with anything. Some people like to narrow the hallways and the walkway, and when it's time emergency, everything block up. Your bucket open, something you would normally bucket open, and then we have problems getting out. So we're saying keep your walkways free. Egress and ingress must be easy in your house. And of course, number 2 on the list, people like to do this. Will I put a nice big heavy vase them and pretty things high up? We're saying to you, practice a safer thing. Heavy things goes on the lowest shelf or on the ground. Lighter things go up. Less likely something to fall and cause you serious harm or injury. And of course, where you have your whatnot and all of these other furniture, we encourage you to bolt them to the walls where possible, so that they remain in place and they don't tumble over on you or to block your path from getting out. For your offices, it is the same. Have an earthquake response plan. Keep your routes clear. Do not fill up under your desk with lots of boxes and all that stuff. And when the earthquake comes, you can't go under there because the boxes are safe and you are not. Of course, the exits, make sure those are working properly. Nothing is blocking the walkways. And where you have filing cabinets and those drawers are turned out into the walkways, that you practice keeping those drawers locked with the key inside for safety reasons, for security reasons, or you want to put things in a vault rather than a filing cabinet, but you want to have the keys are there and you keep it locked all times. During the earthquake, stay inside if you're inside. If you're outside, stay outside. When you're outside, you crouch, you get low, as low as possible and cover your head just the same. But make sure you stay away from things that may fall over on you. And if you're inside, you get under your desk, which is the safest place. A sturdy desk, not just any desk. And of course, if your desk have glass, do not go underneath it. It's best you find a door jamb to stand into. For the door jambs that have reinforcement, a lot of these door jambs that go to places these days, there are no reinforcement. So it's not advised to stay there. But if you have solid beam columns and things like those that you can go and stand and hold on to or crouch beside, those are good places to go as well. Stay away from windows, stay away from heavy objects, do not use elevators. And of course, if you're in a wheelchair, you know, people are using wheelchair and it starts to shake, you help them to lock the wheels in place and help them to protect themselves by putting their hands over their heads where possible, and then you crouch beside them or behind the chair with them so that you can protect yourself as well. If you're driving, stop if it is safe to do so. And when you're going to stop, of course, you do not stop on a bridge or under the underpass or on the overpass. These things can collapse. And of course, do not stop beside fire hydrants and light posts and those things. You'll not necessarily feel an earthquake when you're driving, but you'll see things happening. And so you have to maintain that visual. If it's not safe to stop, you do not stop. You continue until you are in a safe place to stop. And of course, we know why we don't use elevators, because loss of power, you'll be locked inside. And it could take hours or days before people reach you, depending on what's happening, and you'll oxygen is very limited in these boxes. So we're telling you not to do it. And we pray that you're not inside of it when something happens and then you're not. But again, knowing what to do when you're inside the elevator, you still need to crouch down to try and help yourself from things that may fall. And of course, making sure that you remain calm and you hit the emergency button once you're inside the elevator and there is a shake and something happens. Expect aftershocks. Expect it. It don't always happen, but it's a frequent event after a major quake. Always check your property before for any damage that may occur to the building. Notice any cracks and so forth. And when you're outside, if you see any major cracks on the outside, we advise you not to go inside any building until you get somebody who has knowledge of structural engineering to determine if it is safe for you to go back inside, whether it is to get your belongings or it is to say that it can be reoccupied pending repairs to the damage. Know where your lockoffs are for all your gas and water mains. Know where they are, know how to turn them off. Because this is one of the things that you'll have to get to very quickly after an earthquake. Whether you are impacted or not, always turn them off until you're certain when you do your checks and so forth. And of course, we ask you to cooperate with all public safety and relief organizations and do not try to go back into any building to rescue anybody without the proper support. Right? You have to maintain your plan, whether it's a company plan, whether it's your home plan, and having people know about it and know what to do should an event occur. And of course, always review your plan. If it's even once per year, review the plan. And where you have things stored up for emergencies, you have to check expiration dates and you use them up before they expire and replace them. And of course, the important documents, we can't stress that enough. Make sure you always have it in a waterproof container and somewhere that is, while it is secure, it is an easy place to get to for you to grab and go. And of course, know the emergency contact numbers for your nearest health center or hospital, your police station, your fire station, and the numbers for your the KSAMC, so that should you need to reach out to the authorities, you know where to go to, who to call, what to do. I thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions, concerns, queries, you're free to ask those now.
All right. So, Sir Marlon, I'm seeing some here.
Yes.
Is it true that lots of little quakes reduce likelihood of a big one?
For earthquakes, it is not necessarily the same for each. So little quakes may be helping to release pressure, and so you won't have a big one. Or little quakes may be the warning sign before the big one.
Okay. Is so many fault lines in St. Andrew? Why is so many high-rise building allowed?
All right. So similar to other places around the world that have had lots of major faults and even more earthquakes than we do. Let's take, for instance, Japan, which is an island state. We can build safely if we do and follow the proper building recommendations based on our own building laws, plus what we learn in engineering from other areas. So that's the reason we have the high rise. That's the reason we allow these. And yes, even though we have so many fault lines, not all of these lines are deep lines that will, when you have a shake, will cause major breakaways and so forth. But it is really in the building code and technology we have out there why buildings continue to go up and if it follows the conforming to the standards that they are to be built.
And that is that is key. Follow the proper building
Yes.
code and the building guidelines. And we would have seen a number of breaches, and the KSAC would have put a stop to some of those breaches out there.
Right.
Yes. All right. There's another one here. Somebody want you to share the slide with the fault with the share slide with emergency numbers again, and the
All right.
slide with the fault line.
All right, so some of these numbers may need to be updated. But
All right, so I'll
of
just
course the
wait until you send
119
me
do
them.
work. Right. Yeah, man, I'll send everything to you. Norris, so you can share with the team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the 119. We are having issues where the 119 is concerned, and
Right.
we're going to have a presentation where that is concerned, because we get a lot of prank calls, especially where bushfire is concerned. And when you take a fire truck, send them on a hoax call, and then somewhere is really burning. People like those should be charged. The book should be thrown at them.
Yes, man.
So
We have to find a way to identify them and charge them because they
yeah.
don't do it.
So
It
our
is
next
real.
presentation would be the 119, the amount of prank calls that we get on a daily basis, and especially like how summer is coming up now. We need to let persons be mindful of this and how the new 119, what is happening and all of that. And we also there's a number now. I think I will have them speak to it, where when there's a fire, instead of calling 110, there's another number that they could call. And
Right.
then
So
know
all of
that
that very
person.
important to
Yes, all of
update.
that.
Right.
Yes. So we are getting there little by little, but it takes time, and we need the help, especially from you, justices of the peace.
Definitely so.
I see another
Any more? Let's see
question. Please share
Phillips.
slide. Okay. You say someone hand was raised?
Yeah, A. Phillips again as your reason.
Yes.
Can go ahead.
I'm happy that you shared those slides, and I was paying attention to the fault line. But my question is tsunami related, because we have seen where the earth is screaming out to us. It is. And one of the things I learned while in Portmore, where the highest point was, and I won't say anything more on that. But in terms of where we are in St. Andrew, and based on the fault lines that you show, and based on the flood areas, in terms of developers, is there anything that is done? Because I know sometimes when money go under the table, people get to do, what they want to do anyway. But is there anything in terms of developers that they are properly informed of these areas where it's just a no building zone, or it's just business as usual? And maybe I'm talking to the wrong this is ODPEM. But it's very serious, because when I learned that the highest point is Portmore, and Portmore is how much feet below sea level, that was just crazy for development to take place. And while nothing has happened, it is still risky.
All right. So remember, we have so much land and no more in Jamaica. It's still tiny. But yes, ODPEM is a part of the team that reviews subdivisions and proposed developments and so forth. And when those come in, they are carefully reviewed by our mitigation, planning and research division. And then whatever we would have come up with out of the reviewing, knowing the vulnerabilities and so forth, those are taken into consideration when approvals are to be given. But we're not the only entities. I know there are several entities that come together, and it feeds into what is to be done. At the end of the day, the local authority, through the engineer, the chief engineer within each local authority, has that final responsibility in terms of the guidance of the development and the strict monitoring of following the recommended guidelines based on the building code. So as I said before, the fault lines do not prevent us from building. The challenge is, if we're building to the code, and it is being enforced on the local authority level, then that is what gets us to being resilient and building a good resilient building stock. It is the cutting of corners which gets us into problems. And so that is the issue now we will have to grapple with, because some of us, we don't want to do the full thing because we feel it is unnecessary. And not until something significant happens before we begin to do the right thing. And so we want to get ahead of all of that. And so we're always insisting on, whenever things are being built, that the DRM is taken into consideration and how we're going to respond to them. And also how will our first responders, fire and police, be able to assist and address matters. Those come heavily into play. But as you rightly say, we're political influence, and so some things coming. Some things may not necessarily go the way it's supposed to, but for the most part, we are very strident on the protecting the population in terms of these subdivision developments and so forth.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't see any more in the chat. So on behalf of the St. Andrew Justice of the Peace Association, I would like to thank you, Sir Brown, on this insightful presentation. I would have learned something also and would have heard you. And I hope the membership that was here would have gathered some well-needed information and prepare ourselves for the upcoming season, whether it be rain or sun or earthquake. And we will see how best we can organize a training session and how we as justices of the peace can assist our fellow brothers and sisters that live in the parish here in St. Andrew. So,
I see Sandra has a
the
hand
next
up.
slide about the KSA, just the ones with the KSA fault lines.
And
that
before we
individual one.
close,
This
Next
before we
one.
close,
Yes,
hello?
this one.
Before we
yes.
close, I put a question in the chat that has
What's the
not yet been
question?
addressed. Hello?
Yeah, what's the question? Go ahead. What was the question?
I
I'm
wanted to see that slide again, or what do you do about the assembly point and so. And I wanted to ask, I'm in a high-rise complex. What do I do? Just sit or try to run down this? Oh no, I couldn't manage the stairs at night. Is there a difference in response for persons who are in high-rise buildings? Thank you.
Okay,
Marlon?
very good question. No difference, once the shaking is happening, you are to duck, cover, and hold. It means you crouch down, you get small, you hold on to the legs of the table if you're under a table to make sure it doesn't move from over you. And you stay in place until the shaking stops. Right?
Okay.
Or you're doing the door jam if it is reinforced, or in the corner, where you have the corner of the buildings where it's you normally have it cast. You stay in those areas and you stay small, so that if the shake is so violent, you're not toppling over and hitting your head and your body and anything's causing injuries. And so you remain in place. Once the shaking stops, then you are advised to exit your apartment, the building, and go down on the ground floor to the assembly point. Now, all of these complexes would have had a designated assembly point.
Yes.
Right? And so you go to that area.
But
and you await information from the custodians or the operators of the building complex, because there would have been somebody responsible for the complex.
What I'm concerned about is moving and then there are aftershocks. At what point do you move? Do you sit and wait 20 minutes, half an hour? Because at times there are aftershocks.
Right. You expect them, but the rule is once the major shaking stop, you get out.
Okay. Thank you,
right?
sir.
That initial shaking. So once it has come to a pause, Because usually the earthquake will shake for about 25 seconds.
Yes.
If it is shaking for longer than that, the chances are the building will collapse. If that continuous shaking.
I hope
Right?
not.
So right. But with new building techniques and technology, it lasts longer. But usually an earthquake, the shake is about 25 seconds long.
Yes.
Right?
Thank
And
you.
so if you wait on that to end and then maybe for the remainder of it, another 25 seconds, you don't feel anything, you're getting out. I remember seconds move quickly and you get out of the building. It may
Yes.
very well be that by the time you're coming out, another shake could happen, you know. Right? Remember, these are things that we have no idea and control over.
Yes.
Even except to shelter in place. So if you're moving and you feel it shaking again, you'd find the nearest safety point and you will harbor in place until that shake stops again. Then you continue your movement, getting out.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
And might I add also, you see, for those here that have that are living those high-rise building, or even those that are at their company, how often do you do your emergency check? I'm sure that you have that emergency procedure in place, and nobody has done a test or something
Drills
or
need to be
drill.
done.
Yes, yes,
The
those
drills need to be
emergency
done.
drill. I'm sure none of them have been done because that last question that was asked, Madam Justice, I'm sure you're there in the high-rise building and they have never called and said they're going to do a safety drill, whether it's for earthquake or fire. So what you need to do is to ask the complex or the manager for the complex that they need to have one.
Yeah, because they
Especially
would
now.
have been required to have a plan, and that plan has to be shared with the residents,
Mm-hmm.
and the drill needs to be done. So the residents need to insist that something be done.
Yes. So both resident and workers that are in offices, whether a single story or high rise, you need to find out about your emergency drill. Fire, earthquake.
Right.
All right.
In defense of where I live, we have had persons coming to talk to us, but perhaps not frequently. And when it actually happens, you forget what they tell you. So what we really need, while we're doing this seminar, I just sent an email to management that it is time to have another earthquake drill.
Yes.
And to mark the assembly point. Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't see. So I'm being active while we're doing this. But what I would like to see, that slide that you showed on, I think it is how you plan.
Right.
Or respond.
No, you'll get it, man. We will make sure.
Yeah, we make sure we send it out. Yes.
I want to share it with management too. That is my role, to share with you. Oh yes, this is what I asked them. If there's an earthquake today, do we know their persons to see if anybody is missing from the assembly point,
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. So I've already responded and sent a message.
All right.
Okay.
No problem. So once again, thank you, Sir Brown. Thank you very much. Thank you to my fellow justice of the peace. A very good presentation, and we look forward in having a membership for the other presentation that will be coming up, which is the 119 and the use of the 119. Thank you very much, and God bless. Have a good evening.
Thank you all. God bless you too.
One same to you.
Thank
Very
you.
good presentation. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.